was listening.
Oh, beautiful sound. Now, where were we?
We heard it, but we didn't listen. That's it. Yeah, beautiful sound. What does that mean?
Okay, so now we have our opportunity for some discussion and some, hopefully some questions. And maybe some answers even.
So my question is about skillful means and how to be helpful on a relative scale versus an ultimate scale. And I find myself being a little bit trapped by trying to help people in a relative sense. And then kind of, I guess, my wise mind or my dharma mind kind of kicks in and says, are you really helping them on an ultimate sense? So I'm a little bit confused there. That's just how my confusion has been playing out recently, is that I can certainly help people in a simple way, but is that going to really free them in the long term? Does that make any sense?
Yeah. So how would you know if you were helping them in an ultimate sense?
I think probably the answer would be I wouldn't, because I'm ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what help is.
Yeah. That's kind of the answer there.
Join the club. In other words, join the club.
Yeah. No, it's easy to get ahead of ourselves by having some kind of overarching understanding. And then, of course, we want to do the right thing. And the right thing, in this case, is to do what we can do, not what we think we should do if we knew actually what to do. We get ahead of ourselves very easily, particularly if we've studied a lot. So the simpler we can be about just going about helping people in a relative way, the simpler we can be about that, the more likely it is that we'll discover our own agendas that are mixed in there, and how those agendas arise and all the rest of it. And then with some gentleness and good humor, we can let go of those. So trying to get it right, kind of the right thing to do would be to help people ultimately. There's kind of a piece about that. That would be, well, if not the right thing, the best thing to do. But if we don't know what it is, it's better to do what's in front of us and be kind of simple about it. It's more relaxed, it's more warm-hearted, it's less tortured, it's keeping it simple and warm-hearted.
Thank you.
That away.
Along that line, what came to mind is something that Zopa often says, which is going back to the Parametres. Although what I'm thinking is because I'm also ignorant and confused, my virtuous activity isn't paramita, as in, but at least it's going in the right, even in a simpler way. It's just, so it sounds like the paramitas and whatever entry level I can do, and then add your piece, which is the simpler and the more relaxed, the less tortured, and other agendas don't get mixed in. Is that a more approachable way of thinking about this?
It sounds like it's more approachable for you. So that's really quite good. I think it's important not to try to universalize.
Yeah.
Then we're all trying to do somebody else's practice and feeling inadequate because our circumstance and our capacity just doesn't line up. The way we're built doesn't line up with that.
Can you stop me? What I'm thinking is the ultimate's the view that you're bringing as best as we can in our ignorance. Then the view isn't the action. We have to act in a body, and we do think there's I and an other, and we act skillfully within that as much as we can. But holding that view is helpful. Like I'm hearkening back to something Lama Michael said this morning about even making the wish that someday may I know how to help this being see their Buddha nature. May I someday be able to. And then feet on the ground saying, I don't got a clue in this moment. You know? But that view, that wish, the view that there's no self, no other, the view of the vast open Buddha nature everywhere is cool. And I think the danger I've seen in myself as a helper, social service type most of my life, is not only can you make mistakes, but you can start building an ego around it. And as the one who does know what to do. And then you got to untangle that. So just simple, warm-hearted help. It's kind of like my one teacher says, it kind of comes down to before you give people a lot of dharma, you got to ask, are they hungry and are they tired? And then if they are, find a place for them to rest and feed them. Well, can you see the difference? Like someone shows up at the door and you might be anxious to give them a great teaching on the ultimate and relative.
I just read something really cool that Nagarjuna wrote.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're like hungry and tired. Yeah, so the kind, simple, warm-hearted thing is notice they're hungry, notice they're tired, skillfully feed them something healthy. And that can require a lot of, I think, how many times Venerable Chitran over a number of years told us all the same things over and over and over. And I look back and think, man, how did she be patient enough? I mean, we just sat there like, huh? Can you tell me that again? And it just takes time. But then there's this kindness that comes in from the teacher of provide for your students. It's one of the Bodhisattva teacher kind of vows. Provide for your students. Give them a nice place. Give them food. Give them, heat, cold, AC, everything they need. Like, does that make sense? Yeah.
I remember, I've forgotten whether it was, I think Michael told this story. I think it's about Baker Roshi down, and somebody was asking, so if we see somebody and they're obviously in their own trip, should we have the courage to pop their bubble? He said, no, but if you're brave enough, you might pop your own.
Yeah.
I actually have a sort of an additional follow-up to Ryan's question. What came to mind when he was asking that and when he was being given the answer, I thought to, Shantideva's Bodhisattva path, Tokme Zangpo's 37 practices, and even the Dhammapala talking about the true Brahman does, the true Brahman conducts themselves in this way, that way. The true Brahman is their conduct is such and such, and I love all of that, and that's all really inspiring and is a wonderful source of like conduct to aspire to. But are there teachings, or is there any has there ever been a presentation of something similar to that kind of lays out what confused and deluded beings like me should try to do right now, like safe conduct, not necessarily bodhisattva conduct, but or at the very least guidelines to keep in mind, even if they don't apply in all circumstances. Something that's more that presents that kind of teaching, but is on a lay level, on a level where I know I'm not able to perform bodhisattva conduct. Because I'd love to be able to dispense a Dharma teaching, but it's like going to Haiti and handing somebody a Bible. I'm not really helping them.
Well, there might be someone there.
I think they prefer food.
I think maybe we should just call this Ignorance Anonymous, and then everybody can begin by saying, "My name is Bill, and I am ignorant." But maybe we could just sort of dispense with this self-disparaging piece of this. Like, I'm sure I don't know how to do this. I don't have a clue. But that kind of just a brief amount of levity there. But there is something that is challenging in reading these amazing, the conduct of the Bodhisattva, and it's like, oh no, I don't think I'm going to be clipping off my hand and handing it, then finding out that I handed it. I gave it with my left hand. I should have cut off my right hand and picked it up with my teeth and then given it to him. That would have been better. So these things, they're sort of absurd for us to consider at some level. So then, I think it's actually it's important to think about the progression of practice, and I think Trungpa Rinpoche kind of he managed to consolidate a sense of that in terms of the first step, and he would refer to it as Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana. He put it in that context, and Hinayana is a bit of a sensitive word if it's thought to, particularly if anybody thinks it refers to another tradition. But if we think about it as sort of the level at which we're primarily taking care of ourselves, making sure our own house is in order. And then we can see that fits in a context that you actually can't do these other things until you've actually looked into your own situation and gotten a little clearer about your ethics and the rest. So then we have Prajna, Shila, Samadhi. So we have the three trainings. The trainings of kind of gaining some insight, gaining some discriminating wisdom. We have that's Prajna, Prajna. Then Shila being the ethical piece, the discipline of ethics and paying attention to our activities and checking how we're doing, what are the impacts of our activities, our actions, what are the impacts of carrying certain thoughts, what are the impacts of our speech, really, and then kind of cleaning up our act along the way as we go. And this is kind of a core piece all the way through. And as our capacity builds, if we're actually able to do those things, then we're able to, even we can do the same act that we might do to start out with, and it's just kind of really simple. And it has maybe the limited impact of giving somebody something to eat without unduly insulting them. And the same sandwich given 5 years later might actually be given in a way that communicates something else entirely and opens up in another way. So again, it's very much step by step, but that piece of taking care of our own stuff, making sure that we're actually paying attention to that, that's core throughout. And it's one of the things that sometimes you get, that's another way to get ahead of ourselves, declaring ourselves Mahayana practitioners and then not really paying attention to the basics. But it's really kind of the simple, gentle, good-humored, relaxed, careful, reflective. Those are all elements to incorporate. And when we do that, then it starts to take care of itself.
Sort of like cultivation of, like the foundation practices, even like the four measurables or the four foundations, prajna. It's interesting. I never really, I hadn't thought of prajna as a starting point before recently when we started talking about prajna and what it actually means. It kind of sounds like what you're saying is just cultivating those qualities at all, or in aspiring to cultivate more of them and more bodhisattva-like qualities already is bringing benefit to each interaction that we engage in. Okay, so even just going through like the 8 aspirations of a mahasattva is gonna do pretty good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, prajna. You can see even right at the beginning, like, so I read some stuff, I see something more about my own situation. It's incremental. When we turn it into, it's only the prajna paramita, then it's kind of like, well, it's always going to be over there. And that's problematic.
And often the first step in this discriminating wisdom is about ethics. What is as Bill said, what is my behavior with my body, speech, and mind? And what's the effect? Most of us don't have that kind of prajna down at all. We still do things that are harmful to self and others. So we don't have that first level of discerning even karma and karmic consequences.
Or even discerning
That's so important.
Or even just discerning the benefit of conventional ethics.
The benefit of what?
Even just discerning the benefit of conventional, basic ethics.
Yeah. And that's not even just. It's not an even just thing. It's a big thing. And there are very few people in the world that keep very good ethics of body, speech, mind all day long.
I certainly can't.
I don't do it. I try. But mine goes wacko. Sometimes the mouth follows. Sometimes the body follows. So Those are not simple. They're not lower practices in a way. Yeah.
Thank you.
I came down to ask something that I think you've begun already to address, but specifically in my field, there's a lot of things called harm reduction. There's a practice called harm reduction. And at first blush, some of the things that are done in harm reduction appear to be the most blatantly horrible thing you could do. Giving clean, sterile needles to drug addicts, okay? To give condoms to people, okay? So at first blush, these things appear to be awful. You're encouraging people to do the wrong thing, right? In addition, some things that appear to be awful at first blush, such as, well, I hate to say these things, but sometimes doing something violent may be what's necessary in order to prevent other violence. Am I speaking clearly enough?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Just didn't know if I was speaking loudly enough.
No.
So I would like you, if you don't mind, to kind of talk about how we might look at our own relationship to these things, so that we better understand them and can use some discerning wisdom and ethics in that direction. Thank you.
What question do you actually have within that yourself?
Well, my big bubble ego thinks I already know. And my big bubble ego says that giving drug addicts clean, sterile needles is a good thing, okay? Because I believe that means that, you know, if I exchange the dirty ones for the good ones, that decreases the likelihood of infections and horrible things going out. But maybe I'm not so sure. You know, I have what I think I know to be right. But I think maybe I'm a little too confident in that. And or maybe I wonder how other people respond to that. It, like I said, at first blush, it looks like an awful thing to do. And I'm wondering if you can... Anyway, sorry.
No, it's... I mean, it's quite clear that that one could not just take away from this conversation the idea that going out and buying a huge supply of needles and running around in the population saying, here, I think everybody should have a clean needle to inject drugs with. This is coded. So obviously there's some process of discernment. And part of the process of discernment depends upon looking at the actual results. So then you rely, in your case, in your field, you'd be relying on studies to see, did transmission of disease go up or down? Did the number of drug addicts that managed to find their way into treatment because there was some kind of opening go up or down? So those are the kinds of things that are there. Of course, there isn't, as you're suggesting, there isn't like a single answer to this. And one could say, oh, yes, I know all about all those numbers and all those trends and this and that. But the larger thing is like this, and if we approached it this other way, then that would have a much greater benefit. But there isn't this kind of omniscient location that we could just kind of pick the lock on the door. We'll get in and we'll find out how all this stuff works. Or, you know, we'll get it kind of nailed, kind of completely. So we do go through life half-baked, and we keep on trying to bake, and we keep on tasting what we've baked, and and we rely on other people who are good bakers and good tasters of baked goods to kind of stumble our way through it. And every once in a while some kind of meta thing happens, and then it's completely out the window and we're on to something else. But along the way, then in any of those things, I think probably the more relevant thing for a practitioner is some sense of openness and some degree of humility, so that we're actually able to witness things in a kind of a clear way, as opposed to a self-congratulatory way.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And the other thing, I'm just hearing my teacher say, motivation, motivation, motivation. So when you give the needle, what's your sense towards the person? Back to like Lama Michael this morning is just really echoing. You can give it with a wish that, may this gesture, be the thing that helps you break this. You don't say it to them. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But helps you break this addiction and leads you to totally experience your Buddha nature. But holding that, like I used to struggle around giving money to people who are visibly drunk on the street, or, looking really like I didn't think they were going to use it well. And one Lama said, you give. That's your practice of generosity. You give. And you give with those thoughts in your mind. You can also become skillful, and I try different stuff out. But I am a woman with gray hair, so I'm really kind of not so scary to people, so I can try and say stuff. Well, if they don't know me, Bill, I can look like a very nice grandma. And you can say, like, sometimes I just look people in the eye and I say, please don't hurt yourself with this, and don't hurt anyone else. And it makes a connection. I've had quite a number of them look me in the eye and say, okay, I get it. I don't know if they really are gonna, but I've said something to them. And the other one, someone told me, when you give, $1, give them $2 and say, this is for you, and this is for you to give away to someone who needs it more than you. And I've done that with really good effect, like smiles on their faces. One guy saying, I know just who I'm going to give this to, And then you are teaching them to practice generosity. So that's what this Lama shared. That was so helpful. I was like, oh, this can turn into be kind of fun. Yeah.
Just to add, I guess, it strikes me definitely how you give something to somebody matters. Yeah. And the motivation with which you give it definitely can land in different ways. Like throwing $1 at somebody versus looking them in the eyes and placing it in their hand and holding their hand for a second is much different interaction. Same, on the surface, same impact. If you were to say, I gave them $1, but actually the interaction is a lot more complex, and there's a lot more being exchanged than $1. So I think that the intention, sometimes in this climate, we say, send them prayers and wishes, and that's looked down upon as somewhat like it's nothing, and in some sense I can see where that's coming from, right? But on another sense, if you just give somebody pure resources with no basis of humanity behind that whatsoever, that's not really giving much. in a different sense. So that's an elaboration upon kind of the theme that we've been talking about for the past hour or something. Is that, well, yes, people do need food, but they don't need it thrown at them like they're animals or something. I mean, that's, if I'm speaking from the heart, that's where the conflict comes from, is that yes, people need resources and they should be given them. But at the same time, it's about a lot more than that.
It's hard to know what the impact is.
Yeah, you don't know.
I remember Anthony once, he had heard a story about one of the conferences where the Dalai Lama was, and it was a conference with like the head of Oxfam and the head of Amnesty International and the top people and all these major charities, major organizations to do good things, try to make a difference, try to do something transformative, try to respond to disasters. And I think it might have been shortly after the earthquake in Haiti, where all kinds of good things were attempted, and there are all kinds of stories about how they didn't work. And so the people were kind of almost of one voice asking the Dalai Lama, sort of, how should we do this so that it actually has a good effect? And he thought about it, and as I recall the story, what he said was, oh, I see. You want to know how it will turn out before you do it. And that's not how it works. And so I think in that, then, if we actually have that kind of outlook, we are more likely to be self-reflective as we go through, more likely to catch something that's problematic in whatever our actions are, and to be able to change course and do something else. If we're sure that we know the right way to do it and what the impact is going to be, then we're more likely to ignore contrary evidence.
So what we're talking about is when they plan things really well, like with a space shuttle, you know, there's a normative effect of when scientists all get together and they get in a room and they say, oh, we're going to all figure it out and we're going to know every possible outcome. But there's groupthink, right? So groupthink is where it's so insular that people only share ideas that are accepted and normative, right? So that's like kind of groupthink. But these people know a lot as far as science is concerned. So it brings me to this point where shouldn't we use like our rational thought or our confused thinking? Like
that's all we do.
That's all we do. So science.
It's not should we? Do we have any other choice?
Yeah. So should we use science for anything at all? Like, okay, you see where I'm going with that?
Yes. Well, it still goes back to like, well, we should. So, now we see. We thought out all the options. And now we've discovered groupthink. So now we'll solve groupthink. And then we'll discover something else. So along the way, there's just the kind of the clarity and good-heartedness and humility, I think, are key. And the more clear you are, the more good-hearted you are, and the more humble, then it's likely to turn out somewhat better.
You know, when we're working to help the world be better, help people like you're in a helping profession. That's a good thing. And it's so confusing in there. And so, like literally moment to moment, you know, I'm trained to do this, like Miriam's question, I'm trained to do this. I hope it's helping. Not sure. I mean, you know, I did a lot of legal aid work, years, decades, and I was astonished sometimes at how badly things came out with all my efforts. But after meeting the Dharma, when I start approaching it like, what this is about is me training my mind in the 6 perfections. That's what the whole scene is about. I will bring as much generosity, ethics, patience, concentration that I can. What happens after, and a good motivation, what happens after that? My God, it's so complex, you know? But when I could shift to that with the help of my teachers, to that view, I would end up being grateful for the opportunity to serve. Because I saw, it's something like, you know, Buddhists come from sentient beings. And if there aren't any other sentient beings around, you're never gonna understand your Buddha nature. So somebody standing out there that you can give $2 to, we could thank them because I get a chance to practice generosity. Think if you were in a world where you couldn't give anything to anyone. Oh my God, that'd be like a real hell, you know? So it just starts slowly turning into mind training here. It's nothing about, you know, I got married or divorced and now her life is fixed, or I got her restraining order. I had this one client who would come back again and again with one abusive guy after another. I don't know how many divorces I did for her. It was like Groundhog Day. And, you know, but we became friends and there was a warm-hearted sense there, and, you know, maybe that was the most important thing. Like you said, whether you throw the dollar or you have a talk, you know, and you connect.
But it feels more and more like there's almost 2 brains. There's like the samsaric brain, and there's like the Dharma brain. And like, how do they speak to one another is the thing.
No.
There's different logics, you know?
No. There aren't 2 brains. There is the samsaric brain. There is, if we're going to go with brain, but I wouldn't go there. But yeah, that's what's going on. So the notion, this kind of conflict notion, I think, is it's too simplistic. We're in the middle, and we're in the middle of all our samsaric processes, and getting to know them intimately with some little bit of insight added, then those can dissolve, the confusion can dissolve gradually. And so it's trying to get it all worked out. It's keep it simple. Keep it simple. That's a lot of the things that we do, even like the thought that, well, we're going to send up a space shuttle and we're going to get all the things worked out, and then we're going to also figure out groupthink. It's all based around this notion that we will have success, that we're actually going towards success. And when we look at limited, in that case, is a very complex, but it's a limited thing. We can do huge amounts all around that, and it's still something happens. But when we look into the kind of the much more messy circumstances of kind of the whole soup all at once, then the notion that we have to pick what we're going to work on. Some of us may have the resources and capacities and outlook and aptitude to do certain kinds of things that are of benefit in the world. Some of us may have an aptitude actually to look just more deeply into our experience. Not everybody, again, just as it goes back to the theme of don't universalize, kind of the right way to do it. Not everybody on the boat should run over to the west side to look at the sunset at exactly the same time. It's like, no.
Yeah,
this is not. That's not the thing to do. We actually have to count on a bunch of people being oblivious to the fact that the sunset's going down. Then some people can tell the other ones at dinner oh, it was a beautiful sunset tonight. Oh, maybe tomorrow I'll go look. So it's kind of, when I think about these things, there's this kind of heart, kind of a tinge of sadness and joy and all of that's there in the mix of it.
Well, kind of a soft-heartedness or sadness for the person who wants to figure it all out too.
Of course, for the whole thing.
Yeah, for that struggle itself.
Yeah. Daniel. Yes. No, we need it for the folks back home.
Yeah,
There we go.
a completely different topic.
Okay.
Do you have any suggestions or tips to handle drowsiness during calm abiding meditation?
There are. Take a nap.
I mean, I can say in my own experience,
Yeah.
that there's a certain time of day when my mind is alert in the morning, in my case, and I don't have that problem. But if I try to meditate at other times of the day, I'm often fighting off sleep, which is difficult. So then there's no opportunity during the day for me to actually make a productive meditation if I'm just going to wait until I'm not sleepy.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my case. But just in general.
Well, one thing that you should not overlook is whether or not you should just, in general, get more sleep.
I still have
Yeah,
about
just kinda
15 years.
Yeah. What's that?
And I still have 15 years until there's children out of the house. So
Yeah.
it'll take a while.
Yep. So, but still, that taking time to find enough time to actually be rested is not an insignificant thing. Beyond that, then choosing some times during the day so that we invest more of the time during the day for formal practice when we have a little more energy and can devote that to use some of our prime time for Dharma. That's another piece. Then if we are going to take advantage of all the other times that we have in the day, some of them from our ordinary perspective less than perfect, then there are several things that one can do. And still, this is on the side of kind of antidotes or dealing with it as though it is a problem. Do shorter sessions. Or if you're going to do 15 minutes, you could do 15 one-minute sessions even. Or 10 with little bits of break, so that you really make some intention and then you let go of it. So that you don't get into the kind of the marathon that you can't quite finish. And just instantly go into that, and then the bus is about to leave and you have to go do something. There are other things about just sitting up straight and kind of firing up the mind. But all of these things are, they're better to work on with shorter sessions. Contemplate death, the uncertainty of death. But then, there's also the side of it to look at and say, okay, think about, and this is to go on to the topic of contemplation of death. When I'm dying, am I going to be chipper and alert? Am I going to be fading in and out? Probably. So from that perspective, then to treat these drowsy times as opportunities, not like it's something that we're just going to get rid of this and we're only going to meditate when everything's when all the children are above average. You know, it's all better than normal. So in doing that, then we actually have to take the drowsiness. We have to take our experience as it is. And at the very beginning, the practice I was talking about, approaching our experience without any sense of aggression about it should be other than it is. So we actually can meet the experience, meet the flow of experience in a very intimate way. And then the drowsiness itself, instead of this thing that's, like the mosquito that we're trying to chase out of the room so we can get back to what we're really doing. What we're really doing then is becoming completely 100% intimate with that drowsiness. So carry awareness directly into that. And that's also best done kind of briefly and it's actually, in a certain way, it's best done when it's absolutely hopeless to stay awake. And then you have the opportunity. Then it's not going to skitter away as soon as you go look. Oop, the cockroach went off. Where'd it go? And now I'm awake again. Darn! I was planning on meditating on drowsiness, and now I'm not drowsy anymore. So when it's really we're going out, then we can actually bring a lot of energy into that moment. And look with great precision and carry that energy, carry the energy of awareness straight through the moment of falling asleep. Yeah. But in any case, there's the piece of it. Don't treat all obstacles as though there's something to get rid of.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.